The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker and today I'll continue highlighting a video from the recent Answers in Genesis Living in Babylon Australian tour. Over 10 days, Ken Ham and Martin Iles visited Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth and Melbourne, sharing a series of messages explaining that we live in a modern-day equivalent of Babylon. Today, we'll hear more of Martin Iles' first message to a capacity crowd in Adelaide, explaining why Babylon is more relevant now than ever.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
What did the writer of Proverbs say? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. He says, you want to learn anything? Don't start with yourself. Go to God. I think if Proverbs was written by a modern writer, it would be something like, follow your heart is the beginning of wisdom. Would it not? It's all about what comes out of the heart of man, the self. And of course, we've forgotten that Jesus said in Mark chapter 7, what does come out of the heart of man, lists about 25 sins. It says these things come out of a person and defile them. So we're locking people into this inward look at their sinful self and saying, whatever's in there, you go for it. Live your best life, you do you, and all this stuff. All these buzzwords of the day. I heard here's one of the worst examples, and I have read this multiple times now. Jesus died on the cross because he thought you were worth it. Can I make a point about that? The wonder of Christ's work on the cross is not that you were so good that Jesus died for you. The wonder of the work on the cross is that you were so bad and Jesus died for you anyway. It's not about you, it's about him. God demonstrates his love to us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It's about his character, not our character, not who we are. I actually was in a conversation with a guy recently, and he does a lot of work, apologetics work, with young people who are questioning. And they're often from Christian backgrounds. And he said he was interacting with a young woman who had become so allergic to Christianity that she couldn't even touch a Bible. And so he printed out the Gospel of John on A4 pieces of paper, removed the verses and the chapters and the reading aids and just had text. And he printed that out and he gave it to her. And he said, I want you to go away and read this. Come back to me tomorrow and tell me what it's about. And so she went away and she came back the next day and she started her answer with the words, I feel like it's talking about and he cut her off. He said, wrong. Go and read it again. She said, oh, okay. Went away. Came back. This is a true story, by the way. Came back the next day and she started the explanation by saying, I feel like it's explaining why and he cut her off. Wrong. Go and read it again. And he said she came back 7 times. And on the 8th time, she came back she was bewildered on number 7, but she came back an 8th time, and he said, well, what's it about? And she said, it's not about me, is it? He said, correct. The implications for us are enormous. It's not about us. It's not what God has done in Jesus Christ. We live in a culture that says from every angle and every platform, it's about you. And it's rubbing off on us all, I am sure. Jordan Peterson got this one right when he said, excessive preoccupation with the self is indistinguishable from misery. It's the curse of social media, isn't it? Everything you post can become a 24-hour preoccupation with yourself. Checking the likes, middle of church, how we doing? Pondering your popularity. Reading the comments, looking for little sugar hits of nice things people are saying, agreement, and then you read the bad ones, you think, oh, what's wrong with them? What a jerk. The compliments go to your head and the insults go to your heart. I think that's a Dennis Prager line. Even though they're often not even true. Oh, you're so gorgeous, babe. They're saying you don't threaten them. But, there's a lot of just people saying what they wanted, what they should say, rather than telling the truth. But it's made us all more interested in ourselves. I am working hard on just getting myself off my own social media pages. It's helpful, let me tell you. You know what's becoming one of the most common questions I get asked privately? It's interesting, this has been a real surge. How can you spot a narcissist? Isn't it interesting that people would be asking that a lot lately? We live in a culture of narcissism. It's everywhere. It's in the air we breathe. You know, it's just the psyche that makes a person ultimately consumed with that aspect of human pride that makes themselves the highest value. Let us make a name for ourselves, but hidden under layers and layers of complexity, right? Very hard to spot, very complicated. But that's the heart of the issue. And you know, that is the opposite of Christ. It is literally taking Christ and turning him inside out and making yourself the center of everything and covering it up and lying and deceiving to sort of keep yourself in that position. It is so wicked and it causes such damage and it immiserates so many people when someone is ruled by themselves. You know, Satan and Narcissus are the same person. I think actually, you know, it's interesting, for a long time I used to think, it's interesting we don't see much demonic activity in our day. You know, over in Africa and that, they have all the witch doctors and the weird voodoo stuff going down. You know, last 50 years in the West, where do you see that kind of weird stuff? You know, I just think that Satan's clever. He knows what's going to work. He knows what culture receives what demonic influence. And this narcissistic tendency is satanic. It's a demonic affliction. We are now at the point where we must take who I am, right down to my lusts and my instincts, and make it the guiding star of my life. And everyone must accept it. All must celebrate it. All must indulge it. And people who don't are bigots and they hate me and they're erasing me and they're, you know, making me not seen and all this kind of stuff. And God cannot oppress me or offend me by saying that I'm wrong. It's no wonder people are unteachable. People don't listen because people refuse to be offended. But here's the thing. The costs of this kind of culture, yeah, we can look at all the psychological costs, we can look at all the social costs, but we shouldn't really make that the priority. The priority is our spiritual cost. It's interesting, what does God say? He says, I dwell in the high and holy place, and with him who is of a humble and a contrite spirit. Jesus said as the first beatitude, the first character quality in his kingdom, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Christ's kingdom is a kingdom of humility. But just a bit of this pride culture threatens to rub off on us all. And the problem we have is that we're not so stupid as to bow to like a Nebuchadnezzar image, but we are stupid enough to bow to our own image. And that's what we so often do. And you know, that's Babylon's pride. It's interesting, the hostility of Babylon is kindled against people who speak against these idols of identity in particular, who speak in this way. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego saw in their own context. They spoke against the idol, and the hostility that we spoke of before was kindled against them. You imagine the pressure that was faced by them. Imagine the scores of satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, and officials, as the text says on more than one occasion. You know, I tell you one thing. It's very, very, very hard to be out of step when you're in that crowd. These are the people who control the reins of power of the known world. And you either belong or you don't. Right? I saw something of this over the last 10 years or so. They can control your destiny. How conspicuous these guys must have been in that place. When everyone's down on their faces, standing up. And notice a few things about the situation. The first one is that they seem to be alone. The accusation comes against certain Jews. Which Jews? Well, only 3. Out of all those people. Actually, in Daniel 5, the ratio is 1,000 to 1. 1,000 lords at the feast, Daniel not at the feast. These three loners, however, these three sort of outcasts who have hostility kindled against them, remember they're maliciously accused, that's a quote from the text. These three lives that are on the line, who stand to lose their careers, who stand to lose out in the face of those who command the levers of the world's power, which was what Babylon was. It was these three that God himself saw and chose to leave the glory of heaven to stand with them in that fire. And the lesson is this: never, ever, 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 ever go by the counting of heads in the service of God. Never. Never be ashamed of being alone. Because if you do right, you are never alone. You are in the best company in the world. Notice also, they're not just lonely, well, not really, as we just saw, but they're also prospering. And I do wonder sometimes whether this is one of the reasons the trials can come to people, because they're prospering, they're comfortable. But if they're prospering and they have so much, they're officials in the government and all this kind of stuff, they have a lot to lose. And the cost of not compromising is enormous. But the benefit of compromising seems great, because they could just carry on and enjoy all the benefits. And I call this a Babylon choice. And all of us will face, if we haven't already, Babylon choices in our life. All of us will face moments where we need to make a decision, we need to say something, we need to stand apart and refuse to be with the crowd, and the consequence will be that something of Babylon's good times and good things will no longer be yours. And this is what happened to Daniel on day 1 in chapter 1. Eat the king's food. Can't do that. Oh, man. Talk about messing it up straight away. Giving up his place in Harvard University and the White House, which is the equivalent of what he had. Why? Over food. Well, he had a Babylon choice, didn't he? The fiery furnace, a Babylon choice. Bow to the image, worship a false god, or go along with what's happening here. Or lose a lot. The lion's den, another Babylon choice. This is Babylon's hostility and Babylon's seduction coming together in a really nasty way. It's interesting, we live in a Western culture, and it has prospered us. It has, for a long time. The value of the family home has gone up a lot. Superannuation scheme has been pretty effective for many people. There's a long time where the strong Christian who confesses Christ and believes the Bible and preaches in church on Sunday and leads an upstanding life can nonetheless have a good name, be socially integrated, be held in high regard, enjoy professional standing, and lose very little most of the time. And that's the thing that's slowly changing. The problem is that we know, many of us, that there could be a day, and some of you in your professional contexts know this, some of you who are about to go to university know this, there could be a day when Babylon walks straight up to you and says, hey, you, yes, you, bow to my idols. And you've got a Babylon choice. You can either go along with it, not stand out, and enjoy Babylon's rewards, or you can stand with these men and say no.
This is The Spotlight, and we've been hearing Martin Iles in part of a series of messages shared during the recent Answers in Genesis Living in Babylon Australian tour. As Martin says, there is a lot that we can learn from Babylon as a place and also from the metaphor that it became. I'm Jen Spiker, and next time on The Spotlight, we'll hear the conclusion of the message that Martin shared to a capacity crowd at the Adelaide Convention Centre. If you can't wait and want to watch Martin's message in full, you can do that right now in the Free Vision app. Just tap the Watch tab and scroll to the Living in Babylon Australian Tour channel for this and more talks in this series.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the Free Vision app.